Australia is following the United Kingdom down a path of no return. Right now, new hate speech laws are being rushed through Parliament, and buried within them are provisions that fundamentally change the relationship between citizen and state. This isn't about being polite. This isn't about stopping bad opinions. This is about reversing core legal principles that Western democracies are built on. And once those principles are gone, they're not coming back. Let's start with the most dangerous part. Part 7, Division 1, removes the burden of proof from the prosecution or the police. Under these provisions, the prosecutor no longer has to prove guilt. The accuser must prove innocence. This is not a minor procedural change. This is a complete inversion of our justice system and directly violates Article 14.2 of the ICCPR, which states that everyone charged with a criminal offence has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Australia signed that treaty, and Australia claims to uphold it. Yet here we are, legislating the exact opposite. When the state no longer has to prove its case, every citizen becomes legally vulnerable by default. That's not democracy, that's administrative guilt. In this case, it's centred around hate symbols, but once a precedence is set, the rule can be applied anywhere. That's scary. This symbol is thought by some to be racist and white supremacist. I can go to jail for wearing this, and I have to prove I'm just a patriot and I just love my country. How do you do that? That scares the crap out of me. Next is the exemption for religious texts. This is being sold as protection of faith. In reality, it's creating a massive loophole. Under these laws, someone can quote religious scripture and be exempt, even if that scripture contains explicit calls for hatred, violence, domination, or the murder of others. That means anti-Semitic rhetoric can continue unchecked simply by framing it as a religious quotation. It means Islamic preachers and others can bypass the law entirely, while ordinary citizens are prosecuted for way less. So what it's actually introducing is a de facto blasphemy law, because religion is shielded from scrutiny. Radical ideologies gain legal cover. This does not reduce extremism, it actually protects it, and history shows exactly where that leads. Australia has held 2 referendums about religious freedoms, one back in 67 and another one in 88. I was lucky enough to be old enough to vote in 88, and I voted no. But Albo isn't asking this time, he's just installing these laws. Now I want to talk about radical vilification in this papers that have been leaked. The wording is pretty clear. It says it is immaterial whether hatred was intended or even occurred. What matters is a person that feels intimidated. That's not objective legal standard, that's subjective emotional response. So under this framework, no intent is required, no harm is required, no measurable outcome is required, only someone's feelings. Law is supposed to restrain power with clarity. Where can there be clarity if it's just someone's feelings? This law will do the opposite. When feelings become evidence, speech becomes liability. Another critical addition is to section 80.2H, subject 9 of the Criminal Code. And it states that a law does not apply if something is contrary to public interest. That sounds pretty reassuring until you read it and you understand and realise what it really means. If a law doesn't apply when it's contrary to public interest, then it does apply when the authorities decide that it is public interest. That decision is not made by a jury of your peers. It's not made by you, the public. It's made by law enforcement or the courts or the executive, being the government of the day. So truth becomes conditional to the government of the day, and speech becomes permission-based. And public interest becomes whatever those in power say it is. The last subject I'd like to cover is something hidden most quietly deep down in section 5. The AFP minister is not required to observe whether procedural fairness has been satisfied. Just let that sink in. No obligation to ensure any fairness, no obligation to ensure due process, and no obligation to ensure any natural justice, because he doesn't need to do that. This isn't a safeguard failure. This is the total and utter removal of the safeguard entirely. If due process is optional, you don't have any rights. So I'm going to give you a warning here. These laws are not about stopping hatred. They're about expanding state power while lowering the standard required to use it. They want to reverse the presumption of innocence, protect religious extremism, criminalise hurty words or subjective feelings, centralise truth under public interest, and remove the guarantee of free and due process. Once speech becomes something you must justify to the state, your freedoms have already gone. That's how it starts. It doesn't start with tanks. It doesn't start with being arrested, but it starts with laws that sound reasonable until you read them. Guilty until proven innocent. So what can you do about it? Well, firstly, and today, you need to write your federal member. Tell them plainly and very, very, very clearly that you reject these laws, and that reversing the burden of proof, the removal of due process, and the criminalisation of hurty words is not on. That can't be the new basis for all of our legal system. Make sure that you CC the Prime Minister on that letter, so his office gets thousands and thousands of letters rejecting what he wants to do. Make it impossible for this to be ignored and for him to actually pass these laws. Next, sounds a little selfish, but comment below, not with slogans and hate for elbow, but with clear objections. If thousands and thousands of people do this publicly right here, it's going to force some attention. Silence is what will allow this to pass quietly, and for your laws and your life to be strangled by hate speech laws that are just there to shut you up. And thirdly, urgently share this video to everybody. Algorithms don't matter, people do. Send it to friends, families, group chats, and anybody, especially those that say, oh, this won't be used against me, because every bad law was passed for someone else until it wasn't. And finally, we need to demand a referendum. This is not a minor adjustment to our legislation. This is a fundamental change to our legal rights. Australia should decide this, not the Prime Minister, not the ministers, not party insiders, and certainly not his cronies. So if the government believes these laws have public support and are in the public interest, they should be willing to put them to a public vote. And finally, do not assume this will stop on its own. Remember, guilty until proven innocent.